Sarah, thanks so much for joining us. I'm joined by, should have just said, hey, my buddy Sara Sanchez is here, but I went the long way about it. Sarah, how's it going today?
It's going pretty great. I was at Wrigley Field last night, sitting in the left
Nice.
field bleachers, watching the Cubs come back to beat the Giants. And Christopher Morel had a bat flip for the ages. If you know anything about me, you know that I am here for all Christopher Morel bat flips. If you haven't seen it yet, there's like a point of view where the bat enters the screen, which is probably my favorite angle.
Beautiful. I'm excited. We were talking backstage before the show. I'm excited to go look for that. Unfortunately, my Seattle Mariners had a real rough one against the Cincinnati Reds. Let's just not talk about it. Well, I'll tell my therapist about it in a couple of days. We're going to be giving you some lineup stacks, some pitchers to use. But first, let's take a quick look. And luckily, another day where we're not going to have any weather stuff. And this has been kind of lucky, Sarah. We have had some real fortunate weather. Like a lot of times in these September games, we're talking about rescheduling doubleheaders, worrying about guys being out of the lineup. But fortunately enough, there's not going to be any issues in that regard. It looks like today, you never know, but always pay close attention. But it's nice to see. Can't say the same thing about the injury front, unfortunately. And it looks like Shohei Ohtani is going to avoid a stint on the injured list for now, according to Angels manager Phil Nevin. But it does sound like they're going to be taking things very precautious. And I'll just ask you, Sarah, knowing that, he's going to be in the starting lineups in games. As long as he's on the roster, excuse me. But there's some risk about some short stints here, and he can be a pretty pricey player to play. How worried are you about using Shohei Ohtani for the rest of the season?
The problem is exactly what you said in the lead up there. It's not that you're worried about Shohei Ohtani. He's still on fire. Since we had news of the injury, he's slashing 306, 490, 583. That's an excellent slash line. You would take it 10 times out of 10. The problem is the price. It's who you're not getting because you're putting Ohtani in your lineup. And the real question isn't his production in terms of hitting. It isn't his production in terms of steals. He's stolen 3 bases in the last 10 games. But the problem is the power really hasn't been there since this latest injury news came up. And now we have the oblique news on top of that. I just worry that you're paying a lot of draft costs and not getting as much of a return as you would have earlier in the season.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And because of the price, because of the fact limited to first base, or in some leagues a utility spot, in some leagues you might be lucky enough to play him in the outfield, you really need that guy to produce. And because of the fact that there is just so much, I don't know if the risk outweighs the reward. And that's weird to say about the absolute MVP of MVPs. As long as you play in a league where Shohei Ohtani is 2 people, where you play in a league where Shohei Ohtani is 1 person, he is the easy fantasy MVP, but it's just going to be such a risky play. I'll take the risk sometimes if he's facing off against a right-hander who's got mediocre stuff and Shohei Ohtani's hitting second in the lineup. Sure, I'll take my chances with that. But you do have to be cognizant. You do have to be prepared to take some bitter with the better. That's a big disappointment considering just how good he was for most, or the overwhelming majority of the 2023 season. Some real quick injury stuff just to keep an eye on. Brandon Belt has missed the last couple of games with a stomach virus. He, of course, is day-to-day. Hunter Renfroe. Now, Renfroe was scratched from the lineup with a hamstring issue. Did get into the game yesterday against the Mariners, who I can't believe I have to talk about that game when I just said I wasn't going to talk about it, Sarah. But we do have to bring up that he was able to get in, but was immediately pinch ran for. Renfroe going up against Logan Gilbert probably isn't a great lineup spot for him anyway, if he was to be put in the lineup. But if you are considering him, be cognizant that there is a chance that he won't be in the lineup today. Actually, I think a pretty good one, especially in a getaway game. Lane Thomas currently dealing with a back issue. Thomas has been really good for those Washington Nationals, one of the bright spots. Got to keep an eye on that. With the Nationals nowhere close to playoff contention, there's a very good chance he's going to sit. And then finally, just wanted to mention something Sarah brought up. Patrick Bailey, he left yesterday's game with lightheadedness from a play at the plate. Probably a good chance that Bailey won't be playing in that game. Yeah, Sarah?
I don't think so. And the thing that was notable about this is Bailey had already come into the game for Blake Sable. So this is like in the 8th inning, Bailey gets pinch hit for. They don't have an extra catcher. I was keeping score in the bleachers, kind of like running through the roster, trying to figure out who the backup catcher was. So I'd be stunned if Patrick Bailey started today after getting pulled for what I imagine are concussion symptoms that happened after a real tight play at the plate with Jeimer Candelario. And so hope he gets well soon, but I'd keep an eye on Patrick Bailey in the Giants lineup today.
Yeah, absolutely. And with 28-man rosters, there could be a chance that could be a concussion list injury type of situation. So definitely want to pay close attention there. Sarah, I know you said that you're not going to Wrigley. You might want to get there with a glove. Like hey, you see it in hockey all the time. You see the emergency goalie come in. Why not have an emergency catcher? In fact, I've talked to you about this before. There absolutely should be emergency catchers in baseball, shouldn't there?
Oh, there absolutely should. I mean, I think that with roster expansion, you'll see more teams just pull up a third guy. You've seen that already with the Nationals this year. They've got a third catcher on the roster who I don't think had played as of last week. He might have gotten in this week, but he's really there for the same type of reason, right? Keibert Ruiz has had some concussion issues.
Right.
They want to make sure that they've got a backup to the backup if they need one.
Speaking of that, real quick, before we get into the lineup stuff, what do you think about expanding to just 28 now? Now, personally, I'm glad it's not 40 anymore. I think 28 is too short. I would like to see it something like 32, 33, something along those lines. Where do you side on that?
I just want them to limit the number of pitchers. I like it for the pitcher limitations, and I like the fact that you can only bring up one pitcher because we all know that the Giants and the Rays and a bunch of other teams, they would just call up a bunch of new relievers, right, and just stack the bullpen. I do think it's great for those hitting opportunities. I honestly think for the good of the game, it truly depends on the manager. One of the things that's kind of bugging a lot of Cubs fans at the moment, Alexander Canario got the call up a week ago and hasn't sniffed playing time. What are you even doing? He was one of the hottest hitters in AAA.
Yeah.
You're telling me he can't take an at bat from Patrick Wisdom or Mike Tauchman, and that bothers me. It's like he's just here to sit on the bench at this point in time. I'm not really sure what's going on there. So I do think that expanding the rosters a little bit more can provide the manager with some flexibility, but you have to have a manager who's willing to use it. And some of these managers aren't willing to.
Yeah. And I think that's fair. And the other thing that kind of bugs me about this roster stuff, unfortunately, is I think it's an excuse for service time manipulation. I think it is a reason why to keep guys like Pete Crow Armstrong and Jordan Lawler and those guys down. I do think there's a chance that we will see both of those guys, by the way, and we'll talk about them a lot when they do get that call up. I think that they are both extremely fantasy relevant, but I would prefer to see a few more hitters. I just think it's fun, especially for teams that are out of it. It gives fans a chance to see a little bit of the future. We talked about like the Yankees calling up all these guys. Sure, it is basically like a promo video for them. Like it's like hey, things are bad now, but they could be pretty good pretty soon. We've got Jason Dominguez and we've got Everson Ferreira. In that regard, it gets a little cheesy, but I'd prefer to see that than to see just the humdrums, the same veterans going out there and losing 6-4 every night. So yeah, I'll be curious to see how that's addressed in the next MLBPA. But let's talk about Wednesday and let's talk about some stacks to play. Full slate of games coming today. It's a little bit of a weird day, Sarah, because there are a lot of early games. There are a lot of mid-afternoon games. It's very spread out. So you're going to want to make sure that you're looking and playing in the right lineup. But Sarah, who's a lineup stack that you like today?
Yeah, great call out on making sure that you're in multiple stacks. And honestly, you have lots of options here that are pretty fun. I ran an early stack through the optimizer. I put it on the auto stack, just seeing what I could do for this slate of afternoon games. And I really like stacking this Diamondback team against the Rockies. The Rockies have not been very good this year. The Diamondbacks are in the playoff hunt. And I think that you can put a nice stack together that includes a handful of Corbin Carroll, Geraldo Perdomo, Tommy Pham, and Christian Walker. And these guys have been just incredible all year. But I want to just flag in the last 30 days, Christian Walker has a WRC plus of 162. He's been 62% better than league average at driving in runs. He's slashing 319, 390, 593 over that time period with 7 home runs. I mean, you could do a lot worse than having Christian Walker manning first base for you.
Yeah, you can do a heck of a lot worse. And I love Corbin Carroll. Like, I want to try to get that guy in my lineup as much as possible. He's such a good chance for a combo meal. I like the Gerardo Perdomo call because an inexpensive option to put in the middle of your infield as well. Chance to add, because there's some really good starting pitchers going today, a chance to save and maybe add one of those guys. That makes absolutely perfect sense. Friendly matchup too, going up against a team that is bad. And so, yeah.
One more
Please.
quick note on Perdomo before we move on. He has, you look at the batting average and you might not be super impressed, but his on base percentage, he gets on base all the time and the man will steal a bag. So you're looking at like a 344 on base percentage over the last 30 days. He's stolen 3 bags in that time period. I love Perdomo as part of my stack.
Sure. And, a lot of people think in DFS, like, I think on base percentage matters more in DFS than it does in Yahoo or standard 5x5 leagues, because that chance to get on and to score runs can be so important. Don't get me wrong. It's important in 5x5 as well. But, the 0 for 2 with 2 walk game, I think, is more helpful in DFS because of that chance to score a couple of runs than it is in your typical 5x5 league. I think that's a really good call. I keep saying I'm not going to talk about Mariners Reds, and now I'm going to recommend you play the Mariners against the Reds. This is in the turbo lineup, by the way, in DraftKings, which offers some interesting options. But the Mariners have lost 2 straight. They actually did score 6 runs yesterday against Connor Phillips, which was an interesting pitching matchup, as Phillips is a former Mariner prospect. They're going to face another prospect today in Lyon Richardson, who has not looked good in his short and limited time. And this is not one of the big Reds upside plays either. This is a mid-rotation type of starter. The fact the Mariners have lost 3 straight and are playing for their playoff lives right now, playoff odds have dwindled from 90% to like the high 70s, I believe, at the last time I checked. Still pretty good, but they're playing for their lives with the Blue Jays playing well, and that AL West is just crowded. And I think that stuff matters. You want motivated lineups in these September games. So I'm going to take Cal Raleigh, aka Big Dumper. I'm so excited I finally got to say Big Dumper on the Sportstopia Fantasy Fire and Ice podcast. And then I'm going to take the whole Mariner outfield. I'm going to take Julio Rodriguez, Teoscar Hernandez, who have just been scorching hot with the bat. Julio with one of the best Augusts, if not for Mookie Betts, would be talking about the best August. What Mookie Betts did, by the way, in August is just indescribably good. One of the most impressive things I've ever seen. But Julio was awfully darn good as well. And then I'll also take a Dominic Canzone, who is a very fun name to say, but also that left-handed power in Great American Small Park, as coined by Jeff Erickson. But I'm still going to give Sarah credit for it because she was the first person that I ever heard say it. I like all of those guys a lot. It wouldn't shock me if 3 of those 4 guys hit a homer today, should score a bunch of runs. And, you see the jersey behind me. I'm rooting for it too. I want to see that Seattle Mariner team continue to score a bunch of runs, but going more with my head and my heart here, I think the Mariners are an excellent play in fantasy today.
I love that call. And can I just say, you mentioned how hot Julio Rodriguez has been, and absolutely, totally agree. Have him on a couple of season-long teams. But the guy that I'm looking at here, who I really love in this stack, is Teoscar Hernandez. He's been on fire for the last week and change. And if you go back to the 28th of August, he's slashing 355, 382, 677 during that time period. He's just been scorching hot.
And he was due for it. Like, let's just be honest here. And Teoscar Hernandez can be frustrating because his approach at the plate is no thank you, if we're just being honest. Like, he swings at a lot of pitches outside of the strike zone. But there's very few hitters who make more hard contact than Teoscar Hernandez. And he's was absolutely due for a run like this. He is a big reason why the Mariners went on. Obviously, Julio got all the accolades, and deservedly so, because of his defense and his speed and all of that good stuff, on top of the offensive fireworks. By the way, he's homered 3 times in the last 2 games. You love that. And the favorable fantasy park as well. But Teoscar Hernandez has been a big part of the Mariners' success. Sarah, who else are you looking to stack today?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not trying to pick on the St. Louis Cardinals here, but things have been rough for the St. Louis Cardinals. They're starting Dakota Hudson today against the Braves. This is in the main or the night stack. And honestly, like, you've got to love what you can do with the Braves lineup. I have been stacking the Braves all season. It is not the contrary play, but frankly, sometimes you got to add a little bit of what the contrary play is with a little bit of what the standard play is. And so I think you take maybe a more contrarian lineup from the optimizer, but you mix in a handful of these Braves guys, you've got yourself a winning stack. Sean Murphy, Ozzie Albies, Eddie Rosario, and Austin Riley have all been super hot lately, and I think they are going to mash against Dakota Hudson.
It's such a favorable matchup. Like, you just look at what that Atlanta lineup has done, and you look at what Dakota Hudson offers. And look, Dakota Hudson is a pretty nice real life pitcher because of his ability to keep you in games and get some ground balls, but he doesn't have the stuff to compete with that type of lineup. Very few starters do, if we're just being honest. That Atlanta lineup is just, it somehow seems like it's almost been underrated how good that team has been. Real quick, Betts or Acuna, who's your MVP?
Oh, that's a really tough question. I'm going with Ronald Acuna Jr. And I know that the trendy answer right now is Mookie Betts, and I am truly impressed with what Betts is doing. I love the defense. It's unbelievable that he can come in and play second base and even spell them a little bit at shortstop with what he does in the outfield and at the plate. He's an incredible athlete. But when I look at what Ronald Acuna is doing this year, I think we lose sight sometimes of how rare it is for anyone to do something for the first time ever in Major League Baseball. And that man has the only 30-60 season in baseball history, and he's tacking on. Like, it's crazy.
Insane. It's insane. And like, you just watch what he did. I think it may have been a motivating factor that the odds were starting to favor into Betts. And if you go to different betting sites, you see different things. But that series he had against the Dodgers was kind of like, are you kidding me? Have you seen what I have done all season long? I'm still laying my money on Acuna. Don't blame people who bet on Betts early on, for being excited about it, because he's definitely put himself in the race. It's definitely a two-person race now. All due respect to Freddie Freeman, who's having a fantastic year as well. But this is going to be a fascinating one. It's definitely going to make things interesting. American League race is over. National League race, not so much. All right, let's talk about some starting pitchers, and I'll go with Matt Manning. I have been really impressed with what I have seen from Matt Manning over his last couple of outings. And in fact, really just the month of August, a 2.80 ERA, not a lot of strikeouts, with only 19 strikeouts in 35 and 1/3 innings, but he only walked 7 guys in that. And he is so good at limiting self-inflicted damage. And take a look at what he's done over his last farts. Wow, Chris Crawford. That is we will have that on the blooper reel for Sportstopia for a long time. Against Boston, 5 1/3 innings, 0 earned runs. Against Cleveland, 6 innings of 1-run baseball. Against Houston, 6 1/3 innings of 0 earned runs. And he's coming off 6 shutout innings against the New York Yankees. Look, the Yankees are fun right now to watch just because they've got so much young talent in the lineup. But there's a lot of volatility and a lot of ability, or a lot of opportunity, I think, for mid-rotation arms to look better than they are. And that's what I think Matt Manning is. I think he is a mid-rotation starter. But I'm going with Matt Manning, and I'm just going to tell my mom not to listen to this one because I said farts.
I like the Manning call. He showed up on a lot of my stacks as I was playing around with the optimizer. And that's a cheap option that you can go to for starting pitcher on a day where all of the aces seem to be pitching, right? So like, you could max out your prices at starting pitcher, and then you have to put some of these pieces like an Eddie Rosario or a Dominic Canzone in, because those are the guys that are going to be able, that you're going to be able to afford if you have maxed out on, say, a Verlander or a Strider. But if you want to go the cheaper route at pitcher and you want to be able to roster like an Acuna or a Corbin Carroll, Matt Manning's a great option. And I love your take on the volatility with the Yankees right now. Yeah, they're fun. Could Jason Dominguez go off? Absolutely. And also, they have not been very consistent as of late.
Very, very good point. Who are you using as your number one option? I'm just looking at your show sheets. There's an excellent matchup. I think you're making the right call, but talk about the Justin Verlander versus Max Scherzer matchup, please.
I mean, this is the premier matchup of the day. It's like, they've even like been teammates twice, and there's kind of like a little bit of something going on there, right? You got Verlander versus Scherzer in a playoff race. The Rangers desperately need this win, and I just don't think they're going to get it. Justin Verlander looked a little bit rough last time against the Yankees. I actually think that's just going to motivate him to channel what he has been doing all year long. I think this Rangers team is scuffling at the moment. It's an offense that has been really good for most of the season, but they just haven't been able to put it together. And frankly, like, I don't know, that you got to be down a little bit in that clubhouse after Nathan Eovaldi tries to come back from injury and just gets lit up by Jose Altuve. So I take the Verlander side of this. I don't begrudge anyone who takes the Scherzer side of this. I will be watching this game for sure.
Oh, me too. I'm very excited for it. By the way, a very fun stat that I saw somebody post. Jose Altuve had 3 home runs before the Rangers 7, 8, and 9 hitters came to the plate. That's bonkers. That is absolutely insane. Reminds me a long time ago of Brett Boone and Mike Cameron homering back-to-back in the first inning in 2002, which just shows you that I'm old and I will find a way to talk about Mariners at any opportunity.
I haven't fact-checked this one yet, but a friend of mine who's doing a main event qualifier last night was texting me while I was at the game at Wrigley, and he mentioned that Jose Altuve had like 5 home runs in his last 6 at-bats at that moment in time. And I was just like, that is the most unbelievable thing that I have heard this side of Jose Altuve being over 30.
We stand a short king. I'm going to go with Lance Lynn, who has not pitched actually very well in his last couple of starts and was really bad against Atlanta. 4 1/3 innings, gave up 7 runs. And the start against Boston wasn't that great either. 6 innings of 3-run baseball. But I really like this matchup for Lynn. And I really like, even with 2 mediocre and 1 far worse than mediocre start, I really like what I have seen from Lance Lynn over these last few outings. The Dodgers are really good at these type of things, at making the adjustments and getting these guys better. There was a time when the White Sox were good at that. That time is not now, Sarah. I think you know that there have been some issues in that side of Chicago. Miami lineup is very susceptible right now. It's not the worst, but it's far from the best. Give me Lance Lynn. Give me 6 innings of 2-run baseball with about 7 or 8 strikeouts, and I'll feel pretty confident.
Yeah, I like the Lance Lynn call. I think that he's been really good. And the Marlins have been scuffling a bit. So I think that that's a great call. My next pitcher, I mean, I feel like I've been kind of boring today. I've just gone with ace is going to ace, but I really liked the stacks I was able to put together with pitchers at the top of my lineups while I was playing around with the optimizer. Spencer Strider versus the Devil Birds is got to be just the mismatch of the century right now. Spencer Strider has been amazing, and the Cardinals have really been scuffling quite a bit. So I feel like that I want both sides of this matchup. I want the Braves offense and I want Strider on the mound. And I've been spending a lot of time looking at the Cy Young race lately, looking at Justin Steele's chances. And truth be told, I am a huge Cubs fan. I would love nothing more than Justin Steele to win the Cy Young. And I think he's a pretty good bet with the odds where they are right now. But my money's on Spencer Strider. I think that Spencer Strider has done everything that Justin Steele has done this year with about 50% more strikeouts.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to see not winning or to see winning with not having Spencer Strider in your lineup. You know what I mean? Like being that top guy. Sure, you've got your chance that somebody can come out of nowhere. Maybe Matt Manning has a perfect game or some crazy stuff like that. Sure, that's not completely impossible, but it's really hard for me to see not winning your matchup on Wednesday, not being in the money without a really good Spencer Strider start. And let's just be honest, Spencer Strider's going to have a good start. That's what he does. He's going to miss bats. He's, again, facing a susceptible lineup. I mean, we have to spread that stuff out, but like as much as I like Matt Manning and I like Lance Lynn, I'm playing Spencer Strider over him all day, every day. By the way, I wanted to give this as well. I forgot to give my stack as well. I'm going with the Mets against the Nationals. Just a really easy matchup for me. Nationals starting a mediocre option, and anytime the Nationals are starting a mediocre option, which is quite often, it's a good idea to stack them. So I've got a full outfield of Teoscar, Julio, and Canzone, along with Cal Raleigh. I'm going to do my best to fill up the infield. I'm going to go Pete Alonso, Jeff McNeil, Francisco Lindor, and Brett Beatty. I'll take all of those guys. Cheap options outside of Alonso, really. And Lindor's a little pricey, but certainly can afford him because Canzone's not going to be expensive, and Beatty certainly isn't going to be expensive. But yeah, I really like the Mets against the Nationals on Wednesday. Any other options that you're looking at here, Sarah, as we pull up the Contrarian Optimizer? Anybody out there that really stands out to you as a play?
There's a couple of leadoff options, and I'm looking at this Angels game mainly because both of these guys are pretty cost effective. You do want to check who is starting because the Angels have been playing around with their handedness splits a
Yes.
bit. And so if you look, depending on the site you look at, you will get different answers for who's going to lead off in this lineup. But it's going to be, in my opinion, one of Nolan Shanuel or Luis Rengifo. And Nolan Shanuel's call up, I think, kind of got buried a little bit with all of the drama that's been going on with the Angels, with the Ohtani injury, with Mike Trout hitting the injury list again. But he has been excellent for them since he's been called up. He's slashing 288, 439, 308. He's at the top of that lineup, so he's on base a ton. And I am really intrigued by him. But even if he's not there, Luis Rengifo has been just as good. He's over the last 30 days slashing 354, 396. 563 with a little bit of power and a little bit of speed. So I like those Angels options at leadoff.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call. And, Rengifo is a flawed player, but he's the type of player who can give you a massive fantasy option. Not listed here on our screen, but Lawrence Butler has been really good as of late for Oakland. I like him as a middle of the order option. Can give you maybe a couple RBI. I don't love playing that Oakland lineup, but I do think he has a chance to be a solid option. Looking here, Oscar Colas, not a bad option, especially against Jordan Lyles. Jordan Lyles, I don't like saying it, but might be the worst starting pitcher in baseball right now. Just a guy who doesn't miss bats. On the 20-loss streak, it's a very good chance that he might reach that. And then Jordan Walker, also not listed here, as on fire as any hitter in baseball right now. Play the hot streak, a contrarian thing type of two with Spencer Strider going on the mound. I don't think a lot of people will be using him, but certainly a name to keep an eye on. That's going to do it for the for the Fantasy Fire and Ice podcast, brought to you by DraftKings and Sportstopia. We really appreciate everybody taking an eye on this, listening to it. You can follow me on whatever they're calling that website now at Crawford_MILB. You can follow Sarah at Sarah_BCB, the underscore team strikes again. That's almost as bad as when I said farts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.